Magnus is dead. No, Jaghatai, he is not. You know he is not. You met him yourself on Prospero. I met a shade. One of many. The Crimson King has been broken, shattered like a mirror thrown in anger. It began when he breached the wards on Terra, and it was ended by the Wolf's wrath. No, Jaghatai, he is not dead. He has become Legion. The fall of the traitor legions of the Adeptus Astartes bears many tragedies and lessons to glean from their descent. Pride, ambition, wrath, and many other traits would surpass the virtues inherent in the legions and the example of their primarchs. Historians and remembrancers would bicker and quibble over the fall of one particular legion more than any, the Thousand Sons, for above all, their turn to the ruinous powers would be the most insidious and desperate. However, there would be one of the revered magisters of Prospero who, despite his gene-father, Legion, and homeworld turning against the Imperium, would stand as one of its greatest defenders, a loyal, humble, and powerful Astartes, whom would lay the path for the future of one of the most revered chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, the Grey Knights, the last son of Prospero, Revuel Arvida. With the inception of the Horus heresy within the mind of the treacherous Warmaster, Horus Lupercal, plans would be crafted to divide the loyalist legions of the throne before the opening gambit of the Civil War. The Ultramarines, Dark Angels, Blood Angels, and White Scars would be ordered to venture to the furthest reaches and war zones of the galaxy. His intent to betray the Emperor, disguised from the wider Imperium, Horus would seek to turn his brothers to his cause and crush those who defied him with overwhelming force. For there would be many Primarchs whose resolves would be unflinching in their loyalty to the throne, with many of the Primarchs such as the Praetorian of Dawn, the ruler of Ultramar, the Great Wolf of Fenris, and the Lion of Caliban, commanding amongst the mightiest of all the legions, and as such, be the greatest threats to ending the uprising. Of the undecided Primarchs, such as the Warhawk of Chagoris, and even the Angel of Baal, opportunities to manipulate them into the fold of the traitors could be exploited. Yet it would be the most wise and well-intended of these Primarchs whose hand would be turned, not by the hand of vengeance nor the blade of righteousness, but a father's love for his beloved sons, and in turn, a son's love to preserve his father. Magnus the Red, Primarch of the Thousand Sons, had already seen his legion become racked with mutations and suffering wrought by the cursed flesh change. His seemingly infinite knowledge unable to save more than the 1,000 souls of their namesake, the Crimson King would be further diminished, with the Edict of Nicaea demanding the end of warp sorcery within the Legiones Astartes. Magnus would observe the corruption of the Warmaster within the machinations of the warp, and with haste devise a means to warn the Emperor of the impending betrayal. Violating the Edict of Nicaea, Magnus would contact the Emperor by breaching the Imperial Palace's psychic barriers and in turn, irrevocably ruin the Emperor's secret webway project, a means to which the Imperium would traverse the galaxy without the constant danger of traversing the perilous warp. Enraged at his son, the Emperor would command his most loyal Primarch, Leman Russ of the Space Wolves, to travel to Prospero and bring the Crimson King to face judgment. Yet the Warmaster, now corrupted by the thrall of chaos, would intercept the transmission and manipulate the Wolf King's orders. Feeding on the Primarch of the Space Wolves' hatred of sorcery and warp conjuration, Horus Lupercal would use his status as Warmaster to order Leman Russ and his forces of Sisters of Silence, Custodes, and Sons of Fenris to slay the Thousand Sons. On the world of Prospero, the Thousand Sons would be slaughtered. Despite their fierce resistance to such overwhelming and ferocious enemies, the Crimson King and his sons would watch their homeworld burn at the hands of the Emperor's executioner. Leman Russ would best Magnus in single combat, shattering his spine in the melee. Yet with his last remnants of strength, the Crimson King would empower his most favoured son, Arzek Ahriman, to teleport Prospero's capital into the Eye of Terror. Retreating from Prospero, Magnus the Red and his fractured legion would forever damn themselves with their submission to the ruinous powers. Yet within this desperate struggle for survival against a relentless foe, Revuel Arvida's legacy would commence. As 6 months passed and the flames ebbed from the scarred pyramids of Prospero, the Fourth Fellowship of the Thousand Suns would return to their homeworld. Finding the broken carcass of their once proud cities, a squad under the command of Captain Menes Caliston would search for clues to reunite with their missing Primarch and battle brothers. However, the Fourth Fellowship would not find their brethren upon the surface of Prospero. Instead, they would be greeted by the equerry of Primarch Angron of the World Eaters, Karn. Engaging Karn and his overwhelming forces, the majority of the Fourth Fellowship would be slain by the hands of the merciless butchers of the 12th. Revuel Arvida would survive the conflict, yet watch as his captain, Caliston, would be captured by the World Eaters. Seeing portents of the future due to his psychic might and specialization as a member of the 15th Legion's Corvidae cult, Arvida would evade capture by the 12th Legion. That he would not die on Prospero, alike to many of his fallen brothers, Arvida would attempt to glean what little information he could about the destruction of his homeworld. His misgivings of Captain Caliston's unshakable faith in their Primarch proven true, Revuel Arvida had always been critical of his Genefather's actions and abilities. Observing the damage caused to be beyond even of his own Primarch's natural abilities to employ, Arvida would eschew the stratagems and teachings of the Crimson King to prevent falling prey to their oversights and flaws. Unable to decipher the number of survivors that could have fled the system, Arvida would continue to evade his pursuers with the assessment that he may be the only living Thousand Son remaining of his legion. Yet as the days waned and the pursuit of the Hounds of Chaos resumed, Arvida would be rescued by a stalwart ally of the 15th Legion, the White Scars. The Primarch of the 5th Legion, Jaghatai Khan, as of this moment had not chosen a side during the civil war of the Horus Heresy. Seeking answers to the ruination of the world of Prospero, the Primarch of the White Scars had led his forces personally to uncover the fate of his beloved brother Magnus and the truth behind the rebellion of Horus Lupercal. The elite First Company and Honor Guard of the Scars, the Keshig, would discover Revuel Arvida during their battle against the Psychnuan beings that now roamed the planet. The warp-spawned creatures would propagate by nourishing on the minds of unprotected and injured psychers, to which the spires of the capital city of Prospero, Tizca, had become a veritable feeding ground. Arvida had fended off the creatures due to his proficient psychic abilities, and would make contact with the Keshig leader, Kinja. Introducing himself as a sergeant of the Fourth Fellowship, Arvida would explain his circumstance as the sole survivor of his company, if not the entire Legion. Drawn to the desolate world alike to the Scars to ascertain the truth of its destruction, Arvida would join the Keshig in their search for their Primarch, Jaghatai. The Kargan had fallen into a great chasm during the battle with the Psychnuan, and the Keshig had been unable to decipher his location. As Arvida assisted the Scars, they would discover a Primarch, but not the one they had intended to find. Mortarion, master of the Death Guard Legion, had travelled to Prospero with the hopes of swaying the Warhawk to join the traitor uprising. Confronting the Kargan, the Primarchs would be joined by their elites, the Keshig and the Death Shroud. Jaghatai would refuse Mortarion's offer, resulting in a battle between the two. As blood, bolters and blades clashed between the White Scars and Death Guard, Arvida would use his psychic powers to create a beacon for the White Scars' Gloriana-class flagship, Swordstorm, to aid them. With the flagship's arrival, the Death Guard would retreat, and the Scars would be teleported to the bridge of the vessel. With the Second Battle of Prospero concluded, the White Scars would welcome Revuel Arvida as an honoured guest of the Kargan, and with the aid of the 5th Legion, Arvida would recover from his trials on the ruined world of Prospero. Befriending the Stormseer, Targatai Yasugai, the two would become close allies due to their shared abilities and status as librarians of the Legiones Astartes. Yasugai would offer the lone Thousand Son to join the White Scars Legion as a true battle brother of the Legion, due to his own being marked excommunicate traitoris. Despite such an honourable gesture and the creation of a hybrid pauldron of both 5th and 15th Legion iconography at the behest of the Stormseer, Arvida would graciously refuse Yasugai's offer. Content to remain a son of Magnus the Red, Arvida would nonetheless remain loyal to the Emperor above all, even his Primarch. Yasugai would honour Arvida's decision and remain a stalwart ally during Arvida's most difficult struggles, for soon, Revuel Arvida would endure the curse of the Flesh Change. For 4 Terran Standard years, the White Scars, now fully cemented as loyalists to the throne, would battle the traitors across the galaxy. Incredibly efficient and deadly during their initial engagements, the White Scars would over time be blunted as the traitors adapted to their strategies. Driven to catastrophic losses during an engagement with the Iron Warriors at Eluvian, Primarch Jaghatai would resolve to travel to Holy Terra to lend his legion's remaining might to aid in the defense of the throne world. Yet for every attempt to traverse to fortify the Sol system, the White Scars would be halted. The warp storm of Calth and pursuit of the Death Guard and Emperor's children under the command of Lord Commander Eidolon would continue to harry and delay the Scars' retreat. Yet with the discovery of the ancient Kaluan warp gate from the days of the Dark Age of technology, the Kargan would gamble the survival of his legion on a desperate maneuver. The traitors had observed and analysed every strategy and tactic of the 5th Legion and would prevent the Scars from escaping. Finding the warp gate destroyed and fortified by traitor Astartes, the Kargan would seemingly be wounded by the revenant chaos-corrupted Lord Commander, Eidolon. Yet Eidolon would be lured into a feint, as the warrior bearing Jaghatai's panoply of war would reveal himself to be the commander of the Keshig, Kin'Jar. During this time, Arvida would stubbornly push back the corruption of the Flesh Change. Kin'Jar had become a steadfast brother to Arvida, and instilled in him the courage to resist the warp-born deformity to which Arvida had vowed never to submit. With Kin'Jar's death, the White Scars countermaneuver would begin. The Kalium Gate had been a ruse, for the 5th Legion would venture to the Kalatas Warp Rift, for within its roiling tides a crystalline void station would be concealed. Within the void station, another Dark Age of technology device would be housed, the Dark Glass. Believed to have been the prototype to the Golden Throne of the Emperor, the Dark Glass would be capable of accessing the webway by the use of a phenomenally powerful Psyker. As the Emperor's children and Death Guard continued their pursuit of the 5th Legion, Stormseer Targutai Yasugai would sacrifice himself by powering the Dark Glass for long enough to transport his brethren to the Sol system. Astral projecting a final message to Arvida, Yasugai would beseech his friend to guide his legion on their journey to Holy Terra. With the death of Yasugai and the White Scars fleet's traversal through the webway, they would be besieged by the demons of Slaanesh. Intending to harm Revuel Arvida, Jaghatai would defend the last son of Prospero from the clutches of the Keeper of Secrets. Yet as they grew closer to Holy Terra, Arvida would succumb to the Flesh Change, rendering him unconscious. With their arrival within the Sol system, Malcador the Sigillite had awaited Arvida's arrival and ordered his body to be placed within a stasis sarcophagus. Arvida's ravaged body would be bound with a fragment of Magnus the Red's psyche, one of many shards of the Crimson King's soul, shattered during his psychic breach of the Imperial Palace. Malcador would hope for the binding to resurrect a fragment of Magnus's power to aid in powering the Golden Throne. Jaghatai Khan would attempt to stop the binding due to the potential danger incurred to Arvida's body, yet the shard would prove too potent to stop. Arvida's mutated body would be consumed by psychic fire, and the Kargan would destroy the chamber's machinery to save his adoptive son of the Legion. The flames would coalesce into solid matter, taking the form of Arvida's body, bereft of the mutations of the Flesh Change. No longer Revuel Arvida, nor the reborn Magnus the Red, the being referring to itself as Ioannis, would be born. Later transcribed to be known as Janus, the creature would join the ranks of 8 other disparate Astartes. With their audience with the Emperor at the conclusion of the Horus Heresy, these individuals would form the chapter of the Grey Knights on the Saturn moon of Titan. Appointed by Malcador as the supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knights, Janus would guide the newly founded chapter in their quest to slay the warp-spawned filth of the galaxy. His service as the first master of the 666th Legion, abounding with the tales of countless slain and banished demons. Surviving into the 32nd millennia and beyond, the deeds of Janus have been largely lost or even redacted throughout the Imperium's history. His sacrifices, lost brothers, and legacy amongst the most poignant of all the Astartes of his Imperium. The seeker after truth must have a care he is not deceived, for false knowledge is far more dangerous than ignorance. All men wish to possess knowledge, but few are willing to pay the price. Always, men will seek to take the shortcut, the quick route to power, and it is a man's own mind, not his enemy or foe, that will lure him to evil ways. True knowledge is gained only after the acquisition of wisdom. Without wisdom, a powerful person does not become more powerful, he becomes reckless. His power will turn on him, and eventually destroy all he had built. This has been a tale of the great Imperium of Man, read by the Remembrancer. The quest for knowledge is a worthy pursuit, for the rewards it bequeaths are numerous and potent when applied with wisdom. Yet the pursuit of knowledge always demands a cost, whether it be pride, sacrifice, or innocence. Be cautious in your pursuits of truth, both small and large in scale, for some truths carry a heavy price, and if not tempered with wisdom and humility, can consume those too eager to uncover them.